Today on the Nerdy Gritty, Sony Pictures recently acquired faith-based streaming service Pure Flix. What would we like to see from this partnership?
One more world disappears inside it. Just another hopeless addict. Well, they make some man instead. If the drums don't get you, the guitars will.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Nerdy Gritty, where we delve deep into the details of pop culture. I am First Des 422.
Oh, that's like a Bible
Thing, yeah.
I'm your family-friendly fox.
Oh, I got the alliteration going on there. That's good.
Yeah.
As you guys heard in that little pre-intro there, we're going to be discussing Pure Flix's streaming thing.
Basically a Christian streaming service.
Right. But that got us thinking, what if there was a Bible cinematic universe?
There really should be. It's weird. I only mean that kind of ironically.
Yeah, only kind of ironically.
Because there's a lot of gold to mine from the Bible narratively. Like lots of little stories.
Yeah.
Why? It feels weird that there's so few. I mean, there are consistently Bible-based movies. Why are there so few, though?
Well, and then especially the shared universe, because there's so many crossover between characters.
Why isn't that a thing?
So, with our
let's get Kevin Feige in here.
Yeah, come on, get in here, Mr. Feige. Jon Favreau, directing.
Yeah, he can make it work.
Here we go.
That's what he does. All right, so how would we structure?
Yes.
That's the question. How do you structure a Bible cinematic universe?
Okay. Here's my first thought on that.
Okay.
As far as just structure goes. And you got to plan the whole thing out ahead of time.
Oh, I mean, that's what Marvel...
Beginning to end.
That's why Marvel has been successful when nobody else has. Because nobody else really seems to be doing the planning.
Yeah, everybody just wants to jump in. Yes.
They see the success and want that success without doing the work.
You got to have everything planned out, all character growth.
Now,
and arcs
luckily,
and
the Bible already exists, so...
It's already there, written down on paper.
I mean, so did Marvel, so did DC Comics, and they failed. So.
Was it Christopher Lee that was on the set of Lord of the Rings always saying, what does the book say, or was that Ian McKellen?
I have no idea. I know
one of them was. I can't remember who
Christopher
it was.
Lee was the only one who ever actually met J.R.R. Tolkien, so maybe he might have been a little more...
I just remember watching the special
features. To me,
features.
that sounds like a Christopher Lee thing more than a...
I remember watching the special features and them saying, whenever on the set, there was okay, how should we shoot this? How should we do this? He was always the guy that was actually...
here's a...
So, but I would say there's got to be a guy like that on this set.
Well, sure. You get some super scholarly, knows the Bible front and back.
I was going to start naming William Lane Craig, but then our listeners probably has no idea.
Yeah, obviously WLC, get him in there.
Get NT Wright, bring him in.
Yeah,
you guys all know who these people are.
Fun podcast. No, here's okay. Obviously, the most successful one is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think we should use that as kind of a bones, see how they've done it. They had little seeds of things toward the beginning, but it ultimately paid off 22 movies down the line with a bit of a coda. So that's where I'm going to start is the end, actually. What I think movie 22, maybe the two-parter, the big finale, the Thanos finale, is essentially the Book of Revelation.
Ooh.
That's when you could even get the battle in there. You get the huge battle between the beast and
that'd be really cool.
That's
lie.
Easily of the entire Bible. Okay, we can get a lot into theology.
No kidding.
Because the actual climax of the story of the Bible is Jesus being crucified.
Yes, the crucifixion.
But as far as the action goes, if you're trying to put it in a cinematic way, I would say the massive battle between demons and angels where God comes down and fights a dragon. And
you'd have to balance between the Left Behind, where they tried to make it real life.
Yeah.
Or I have a graphic novel of the Book of Revelation, and it's beautiful. It's all artistic. It's just section for section of the actual Book of Revelation, and then just drawn out what it says. But it's 100% I'm not going to say intelligible, but it makes as much sense as the Book of Revelation.
Left Behind tried to say, here's what it is, here's what it would be, and it's those are actually helicopters and stupid crap like that, and it's not as interesting that way. Look, I'm trying to look at it movie-wise.
Yeah.
I don't care about, honestly, part of me doesn't care about
theology.
Theology.
We're actually going to talk about that in a little bit.
We are. We're going to talk about that. But okay, so where do we start then? Because that's also very important. Where do we start the cinematic universe?
I mean, it's got to be the book of Genesis, right? Very beginning. Like, I want to have a real like artistic the beginning.
See, that would be really interesting.
Episodic Adam and Eve, like them really just eyeballing the apple, and then even having like tying in some of the book of Isaiah where it's Satan watching over Adam and Eve, but then actually cutting into the Garden of Eden, and things like that. And
see, that makes sense to me. That would, beginning to end, of course. But if we look at Marvel, that's not necessarily how they structured it most of the time. A lot of the times,
okay, that's fair.
They had like Captain America was earlier than Iron Man, but he came a couple movies later, and then you had like Captain Marvel, who was a couple decades before the big Avengers finale and before a lot of the main meat of the story. So I say you do start at
Abraham.
No, you start at Matthew. You start with the Gospels.
Oh, okay.
And you get real granular with stories about like the disciples.
Anyway, Fox, what's been going on in the world of news, my friend?
Oh, just real quick, the nominees for the Game Awards dropped
a
couple days ago. We're going to be talking about those in depth as we do each year, where we'll have an episode where we make our predictions.
And then we're going to have to ask
and then we'll have our friend Chris give us our stats. The more we do that, the more in-depth the stats get, and I'm really excited. But also, both of us are pretty prepared this year. We played most of the games. This is the first year where I've played all of the best game nominees all the way through.
Yep.
Without having to get one in at the end. Anyway, so you heard about, we haven't talked about this though. Have you heard about the Twitch thing where they deleted a bunch of videos without warning that had copyrighted music?
Yeah.
There's understandable arguments on both sides of that, I think. Like, at the end of the day, copyright law is a thing.
And
you're using music you didn't pay
as
for.
soon as you record it and put it on Twitch, it belongs to them.
Right. So it was I mean, maybe you can feign ignorance, but it's not like you have any legal recourse.
Right.
Well, Cyberpunk 2077 they've revealed that they have a streamer mode that disables all copyrighted music in the game.
That's super cool.
You can play through it just perfectly normal, have all the, or have their original music play, but anything copyrighted, because there will be a good amount of music that they've already dropped a few tracks and they're pretty cool. Anything that's copyrighted, though, will not play, so you can just play it normal.
I love this because at that point, this impacts a lot of different people. So the artists who have that music in the game suddenly realize, wait, if I want my music to play on Twitch,
that's a big advertisement, guys.
Yeah, I need to
that's
free
make this
ad
space right there.
And they need to go to Twitch and say, hey, this is okay. And Twitch finally needs to deal with the fact that this is actually kind of good.
This is probably better for the artists than it, or even if we want to go above that, like the production companies,
right.
Sony Music or whoever's making it. Like, that's probably better for them than it is just deleting it all.
Exactly. Hey, speaking of Alfonso Ribeiro,
yeah,
did you know that there was a Fresh Prince reunion that
I
just
did.
happened recently?
It's on HBO Max.
It's on HBO Max, yeah. Do you know a lot about the deep Fresh Prince lore? Or
I've watched it. I watched a fair amount of the show when I was young.
More behind the scenes. Do you know about the feud that occurred?
No, is it between the two Aunt Vivs?
Not the two Aunt Vivs.
Okay.
Between Will Smith and Janet Hubert, the original Aunt Viv.
Oh.
So what happened, and what we've kind of known for years, is that there was the original Aunt Viv.
Yes.
Janet Hubert, and Will Smith at one point was like, hey, she's really hard to work with.
Oh.
And she's really difficult. Okay. So can we give her less screen time? And so they went back to her with a...
it ain't the fresh Aunt Viv
right.
of Bel-Air.
So they went back to her with a contract agreement with significantly less screen time. And she was like, nah, no thanks. Like, there was no firing. They offered her a contract and she said, no, I don't want that.
She turned it down.
Right. But then afterwards, since then, people had gone to like, hey, what happened to the original Aunt Viv? Right. And Will Smith was just like, she was really tough to work with. Like, she was difficult on set, etc., etc.
Interesting.
Well, there has been a feud since then, mostly on the side of Janet Hubert, where whenever she's interviewed for anything and it's brought up,
she brings it up. Oh,
she will just
unload on Will Smith.
Absolutely. Guess who came to the reunion?
They're both there. They're both. I have seen like a little gif of both of them like involved in some way.
So at one moment, in kind of a weird transition from Will just suddenly says, so as a family, we have our things that we talk about. And then we have our things that we don't talk about. We never really together, like publicly, talk about Janet and what happened. And for me, I felt like I couldn't celebrate 30 years of Fresh Prince without finding a way to celebrate with Janet. This segues into a pre-recorded clip of just Will and Janet chatting it out. Anyway, that's what we got for news
That's
today.
the news for the most important stories of the week. Air fryers.
That's so ridiculous.
What have you been up to?
So I watched Ugly Dolls, which is
I saw
animated
trailers
feature
for that, and it just looked like the most generic. You're ugly, but you're good anyway. The inside's what matter.
Here's what I'll say. It was better than I expected, and that is not saying much. That's what I'll say. I thought it was going to be a dumpster fire, but it was not on fire. So there you go.
Just a dumpster. Okay.
Yeah.
You could approach it. Well, I watched a movie that sounds very similar if you think about it very little. It's called Ready or Not, and it's about a young woman who gets married into a rich family, who marries into a rich family who made their money on board games, and she finds out that at midnight on their wedding night, there's a family tradition that she has to draw a card and then play a round of whatever game is on that card.
I've been wanting to watch. I totally forgotten about
it's
that
on
movie.
HBO Max.
Oh, yes.
I won't spoil it for you.
Okay, good.
Okay, I will tell you what's in the trailer.
Right. I know the trailer. Yeah.
She draws hide and seek,
Mm-hmm.
and it turns out that that's the one game that, if that's the one she draws, it's not just hide and seek. It's she has to survive till dawn because the family is now trying to kill her.
Right.
There are reasons, and it's not really spoiler the reasons. Like, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. That makes sense. Like, all that to say, it was great.
Oh,
it was real fun.
I'm glad to hear that.
Extremely violent, but in like a ridiculous way, where it's not really like, look how much paint that's really,
right.
It's
right.
like, ha ha, that person just exploded.
Yeah.
Or something of that nature.
Yeah. On the total flip side of Ugly Dolls, I watched Prince of Egypt.
An
animated film.
Very few ugly
that I haven't
dolls in
seen.
that one.
There's a few. No. That movie is fantastic. Not just in its plot, which is really, really well done.
Sure.
It is not 100% biblically accurate, but that is, I think, for the better of telling a story.
Well, yeah,
especially
a lot of times,
in a movie.
yeah.
The music in it is stellar. The voice acting in it is stellar. I mean, you got Val Kilmer, Sandra Bullock.
So
Jeff
literally
Goldblum.
stellar.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Interstellar. No.
Yeah, it is of the stars.
Jeff Goldblum, Sandra Bullock, Val Kilmer.
Yes, all Middle Eastern people.
Yeah. Oh yeah, all the Middle Eastern people.
All Egyptians.
Dang it, who played Voldemort? What's his name?
Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, him. Just great actors. Voldemort. Yes. All that to say, more than anything, when watching it, I haven't seen it since I was probably 20. Watching it for the first time in a long time, the cinematography is stellar.
Yeah. I watched for the first time Clue.
Oh, yes.
I had never seen Clue before.
So good.
And my wife and I were just figuring out something to watch. Wonderful, delightful.
Yes.
Just super goofy, and also just when you think of, okay, it's based on a board game, you're like, oh no, wait, it's a murder mystery.
Yeah.
But it's also super man, what's his name? The butler.
Oh,
Tim.
Not Terry Crews. Tim. Not Tim Meadows either.
Dang it. We're bad at names.
Tim
we should
Curry,
be better
Tim
at
Curry.
names if we're gonna.
Tim Curry. Terry Crews, Tim Curry. That's why I got those
They're
mixed
the
up.
same people. Tim Curry is hilarious. Has just such a wonderful
dry wit,
and
yes.
It's just goofy and delightful. There's just so many fun just running back and forth across, when he's at the end of the movie, when he's doing the whole drawing room scene of here's what happened before I tell you the
yes.
actual. They're just running from room to room because this happened there. And
last thing I have, my wife and I have started a new TV show called Alex Rider.
The James Patterson young adult series. That's the book series it's based on.
Yeah, it's My wife really enjoys it.
Oh, I understand what you mean.
Yeah, it is cliche in the worst ways. Things like, okay, so here's the basic plot for you guys. There's a spy and he's murdered and they want to figure out why, but it has something to do, they don't know what, but it has something to do with with a school for troubled kids.
Okay.
So they take the spy's son and they give him some spy training, and then they send him to this school for troubled kids so he can be teenage spy kid.
I think that happened in Spy Kids.
The problem is, for a plot that ridiculous, it takes itself Jack Ryan seriously.
Too seriously, yeah.
It is 100, like, Jack Ryan is a great comparison, but you're constantly thinking, he's 17.
Yeah.
He should not be able to do any of these things.
Right. I watched Tolkien.
Oh, yeah.
The biopic that came out last year. I think 2019 makes sense. 2018 at the latest. The earliest, I guess. Is whatever.
Yeah.
I am a very big J.R.R. Tolkien fan. This movie was about his youth for the most part. Just showed is about his youth / his like meeting and falling in love with his wife. And here's the thing, I don't really know what I wanted from it, but I know what was in it was like, oh, okay. It's pretty generic, like just kind of romance biopic where there's a lot of stuff in it where I'm like, that seems like a coincidence, or maybe it is true. I don't know. Like, there's a part where this person is leading him to find something important, and that person's name is Sam. And I'm like, maybe that is true. Maybe that's where he got the inspiration from.
Yeah.
I haven't read enough about J.R.R. Tolkien to verify, but it also just feels like, well, that, like, the writer was just like, oh, this is clever. It's like, no, it's not. It's not clever. It's just hitting you over the head. Like, last thing for me, Spider-Man Miles Morales. I talked about it very briefly last week, and basically what I said was, it's more Spider-Man, which is good because Spider-Man was great.
Yeah.
But I've beaten the whole thing now. I've actually played through it twice to platinum it. I played it on New Game Plus. And I actually think I like Miles Morales more than I like Peter Parker. I like the kind of tone and narrative. The narrative on the surface was, evil businessman is going to explode thing.
Right.
There was a little bit more intricacy to it. But in reality, like, it was much more interesting to have Miles Morales living in Harlem with this like multicultural background to all of it. Like, he and his mom speak Spanish to each other on a regular basis. And it's just like cool. Like, it's just fun to have those different elements where it feels like I've never lived in New York. I've been to New York. It's not white. It's not a white city.
Yeah.
There's a lot of white people there. It's not a white city, especially in Harlem. And it was cool to see a little bit more like this is kind of the New York that, when you get down to the streets,
Right.
And so it was really fun to have that. And I will be very disappointed if Spider-Man 2, the next one, is not at least half Miles Morales, half Peter Parker, with potentially I would love co-op.
Oh, man.
Co-op
kind of like the new
option.
Batman, Gotham Knights?
Yeah, where you could play as both of them, and it just ups the challenge.
Yeah.
Or if you could, at least during free roam, freely switch between them.
That's it? Yeah, we're
that's
good?
all I got.
Okay, let's get down to the nerdy gritty.
For sure.
Hey, before we do that, we just want to let you know, if you're hearing this right now, it means you're listening to an edited version of the nerdy gritty. We just recorded almost 50 minutes of stuff.
It's a little shorter than usual.
Yeah, we almost an hour.
Sorry for slacking.
But we cut this down kind of to make it a little more palatable. This time before this is us just kind of chatting about things we've been up to. That's all kind of nerd adjacent, nerd related things. But if you want to hear all of that, if you want to hear the fullness of what we chat about, we want to ask you to head over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/DesandFox. And there you can become a second-tier member of our Patreon to get access to the director's cut of the Nerdy Gritty, which is an unedited cut of the Nerdy Gritty. Now, if that's a bit much for you, or maybe you just want to support us in a small way, there's the dollar version right before that. So we appreciate that help. Or even if you just let your friends know, tell people, hey, I listen to this really cool podcast. These guys are kind of goofy and funny.
Lie to them and tell them it's really cool.
Yeah, lie to them and say, this is a good podcast.
This is a good podcast.
And then cackle as you force them to listen. So we, no matter what, we appreciate your support. But if you can, and if you're willing to help us financially, that's patreon.com/DezinFox, and we love your support. Thanks again, guys. And now let's get down to the nerdy gritty.
So recently, Sony Pictures acquired Pure Flix. Maybe not Sony Pictures, Sony in general.
Yeah.
Acquired Pure Flix, which is a faith-based streaming service, which I also think, like most streaming services, also produces their own content. And I think that's where they started before the streaming service
there is the film production company Pure Flix.
Okay.
And then there's the streaming part of there's Pure Flix, and then there's Pure Flix Productions, Pure Flix
Okay, so there's the overarching, then they had the various things. Sure.
And it's a Sony subsidiary called Affirm Entertainment.
Oh,
so
okay.
Affirm Entertainment purchased Pure Flix streaming, but Sony owns Affirm.
Yeah, and so Pure Flix is as we said, a faith-based, and that means Christian. It is a Christian production company and streaming service. Some of the movies you might have heard of if you were in this. I know, let's see, there's God's Not Dead, probably their biggest one. That one was actually in theaters. Pretty big release. People probably heard about that. Then there's movies like Do You Believe? And Woodlawn, which I don't know what that is. There's The Case for Christ. There's a movie called Unplanned. I don't know what that one is either.
Unplanned was kind of a big deal.
Oh, was it?
Because it was like a biopic and about a woman who worked at Planned Parenthood for abortions and eventually got to see how it really went, and eventually became a Christian, and also decided this is terrible. I don't want anything to do with this. And so it came to now become anti-abortion, and you can guess how that went. So
sure.
Yeah.
I'm seeing here they also have a Little Women adaptation, but probably not the one. Yeah, it's definitely not the good one that came out. I don't know, it might be good. Needless to say, they put out a lot of movies, and they have a streaming service, and now they are owned by Sony, a couple rungs up, but Sony owns them, which means they probably have more access and more resources than they ever have. Pure Flix has always been kind of a niche market. Of course, it's going for a very specific audience, Christians who would like these movies, because if you have listened to a few episodes about this, Des and I are not people who listen or watch these kinds of movies. I understand their point. I don't think they do a great job of portraying the actual Christian experience a lot of times.
Agreed.
But I do completely understand what their niche
goal
is. Yeah, their goal is, and I can't fault them for wanting to do that. Like, that makes sense to me. So what we want to talk about today is not necessarily like, let's dunk on Pure Flix, because we have have an episode about that. It's about like something about Christian propaganda. It's from way long time ago, years, probably in like the first 50 episodes we did, something like that. But anyway, what we want to talk about today is, now that they have a much greater access, now that Sony and the resources that come with Sony are overseeing Pure Flix, what could that mean for where Pure Flix goes in the future? The kind of movies they produce, like what would we like to see from a faith-based streaming service / movie production company now that they have a lot more resources than they used to? Because a lot of their movies have, by necessity, have been very low budget, which might mean that they are not able to make the quality of film that they would like.
I would like to see film classes on how to make movies and make them good.
Okay.
Not on Pure Flix, but for the people who make the movies.
Okay, mandatory. You have to go to film school.
First thing, dunk. Okay, dunk over.
No, they're perfectly competent in writing a script, like how a script works.
Yes.
It's just they have. Okay, yeah. Let's talk about that actually right at the beginning. Let's get our dunks out of the way. And that'll inform the things that we might want to change. Is that often we see the message of the movie overcoming the actual I don't want to say quality, because that's just a purely like opinionated thing. Good or bad is up to the viewer.
Right.
But the message overcomes the content, I guess, where it's propaganda is also a negative word because it's usually used for negative things. But that's kind of the idea, is we're trying to get you to believe something, and we'll do what we need to do to make that happen.
And you know what? I will almost, from the 2 or 3 that I've seen,
Sure,
I will almost affirm the word propaganda, because they often step in with Christians and good people,
yes.
non-Christians and bad people, and bad people need Jesus.
Right.
Oh, so they can now be
college
good people.
professors are evil because they don't let you do this whatever specific thing.
Right. And everybody's a jerk until they have their moment where they meet Jesus
moment. Yeah.
And then they're finally redeemed. And
yes.
that's kind of like this formula that is in a lot of these movies. And it just paints that the Christian's opinion of people who are not Christian is that we as Christians all think that everybody who's not a Christian is evil and bad and we hate them,
or is lost in a like moral sense.
Right.
Not necessarily like there is thematically in the Bible being lost is a thing when you don't know
almost
Jesus.
a moral superiority.
But yes, that's exactly what I mean. Like you can't be a good person in any way unless you know Jesus.
Which, in the reality of what Christianity is, that's antithetical to Christianity.
That is not true.
It should be, we all suck.
Yes.
And that's why we need
all
Jesus.
All people need Jesus.
We're all the exact same amount of sick. We just happen to know what the cure is.
Yes.
And that's really what the approach
I think what I'll compare them to a lot of times is like Hallmark holiday movies.
Yes.
Where not necessarily like that those movies are Christian movies, although a lot of times it's Christmassy and you know, that kind of thing. But it's just like, we know what we're making here. We're not trying to make the best movie we can. We're trying to get you to feel something, and using this concept or narrative as a method to get there, which is true for a lot of good movies too. They just don't come off as very genuine in a lot of the Pure Flix type movies that you see, or in like the Christmas movies. So anyway, so that's kind of
okay. Dunking session over. Slam dunk competition done.
Right.
Let's move on to what would be cool.
So how could that be made better now that they have more resources with their affiliation with Sony now?
So immediately my thought would just be experience. Like, it'd be really cool to have Sony be able to say, hey, we've got some of these, award-winning directors, or at least very experienced directors.
Are you saying we need to ignore the fact that Sony has put out a lot of cinematic garbage in the last 10 years?
Everybody's put out a lot of cinematic
garbage. They made
garbage.
Ghostbusters.
But even then, Ghostbusters...
I got it. Holy Ghostbusters. Then we don't want them to bust we'll just Jesus juke every Sony movie.
Oh no. Like the blaxploitation movies of the 70s.
Yeah, that's what it is.
The Jesus juke of
Yeah.
today. Oh, I would hate them so much. But no, just having somebody with way more experience. Like, there was a YouTube video a while back put out by a Christian saying, hey, here's something that makes Christian movies bad, and there's a lot of the art of film that is missing.
Yes.
One of the main examples that I remember was a scene from what's the dang it, the guy who made La La Land, the movie before that he made.
Chazelle.
No, the one with the drummer.
Oh, Whiplash.
Whiplash.
That's a great movie.
Yes. There's a scene from Whiplash, and it's this conversation, and he talks about the cinematography of it, and the reason that they pan in and pan out, and, they go to faces at some point, but then it's profiles at another point, whatever else. And then he's like, and here's a very important scene from Kirk Cameron Saves Christmas. And it's just angle, counter angle.
Reverse shot.
Yeah, reverse shot.
Very basic and conversational.
Just having people with experience to come in and say, here's how you make film.
Right.
And here's how you make it good. I think there were a lot of potential in some of these films.
Sure.
I really do.
Any story can be good.
But, I mean, there were movies like Fireproof, where it's one about marriage more than anything, but also about firefighters. And this movie was, again, super cheesy, but at the same time, had some good themes to it. It could have been good.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that having this sort of experience behind Sony and what they have, to have these people come in
more
and say...
More connections to people who have more experience in...
Because I know that Pure Flix wants to have their Christian people at all times, but like you can still send it to a good cinematographer, a good editor.
Sure. I mean, there
in.
there are decisions made in editing. I'll tell you that.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
that can absolutely affect. I mean, even like the message of the movie editing type things can happen. But yes, those are not as grand or not as like devastating as like a bad director.
Yeah.
Can have. I think that's where exactly the big thing for me is. You guys need to be willing to be less surface Christian. And I mean that in a way of saying, we talk often about how one of our favorite quote unquote, there's no such thing as a Christian movie, first of all.
Right.
There's only Christian people.
You can't baptize a movie in the name of Jesus. Yeah.
But movie with Christian themes, one of our favorites is Book of Eli.
Yes,
because its themes at the end of the day are the faith in God, having like
the
lots of good stuff.
Yeah,
don't want to spoil it, but yes, a lot. If you haven't seen it, go watch it.
Yes,
but it also has multiple scenes where he beheads people with a sword,
shoots them,
and
in
it's
the face.
not like a biblical battle where somebody cuts a head off of a Philistine. It's some dude in the post-apocalypse has a gun and shoots people. And it's not him saying, I'm doing this for Jesus, you know? Like it's just like cool battle scenes that are well shot, but the themes behind everything and the ultimate like narrative is about faith in God specifically.
Yes.
And the Bible. So like that tells me that successful quote unquote Christian movies often need to be able, the creators, the writers, whatever, need to be able to step back from saying, this is a Christian movie, to saying, let's make a great movie and have, like, at the core of it, the themes. You can even mention Jesus. That's okay.
Yeah.
You can do that. That's fine. But to recognize that a lot of movies, Fireproof could have a much wider audience, which is ultimately going to be more successful for your ultimate goal of hopefully spreading the gospel, if it steps back a little bit from being Christian movie, because that turns a lot of people off. And that's really the hard part, is how much do you, it's the hard part of like a church ministry, is staying current, relevant to modern society, but also staying like true to your intentions and to like what your the gospel.
Yeah.
And so that's going to fall into movie making also. And it's being better at riding that line and being able to say, we talked about it before. This was not on purpose, but we talked about Noah. And I think that one is actually a pretty good example of this, where it's not, hey, look at how good Christians are. It's actually, hey, look, Noah was a messed up person.
Yeah.
And desperately needed God's grace and received it, but did terrible things. But it's like, it's also entertaining on the surface level. It's not, here's Christian movie. Now it is a quote unquote biblically based movie. There's a lot of stuff that they added in because the story of Noah is very short in the Bible. But it, at the end of the day, still has those themes of redemption and grace and, bringing life to the earth, and also shows as a whole, on the grand scheme of things, the events that are depicted in the Bible. And I think that's a really good example of, there was probably people saying, ooh, I don't know. Ooh, I don't know if we need, like, whoever, wrote it at first. Oh, and then ultimately, it was kind of divisive. But I think it came out better for being willing to step back from saying Christian movie to movie with, about Christian themes.
And I think, you're talking about Noah. I'll bring up, again, we talked about earlier, Prince of Egypt.
Sure.
Because in the same way, it dealt with the 10 plagues of Egypt and how terrible that was. And like, you mourn with the Egyptians for part of it. There's the scene in the movie where right after the death of the firstborn, there's a slow fade to black, and then you just hear screaming mothers. Yeah. And it's rough, and
also very biblically accurate.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally says you could hear the wail of the Egyptians.
And so I think being willing to step into the reality of the Bible, even if sometimes it seems like it could be bad,
right, or dark or negative. So there's a lot of that in the Bible.
There's so much of what current Christian film is that is trying to make sure that Christians and God are always happy and smiley and rainbows.
Yes.
But the reality is that it's really rough sometimes and really dark sometimes, and there's a reasoning behind it. You know, God doesn't do anything without intention, and if you listeners ever have questions about this stuff, there are answers to all these questions on why God does these things.
We'll gladly talk to you about these things.
Happily, we really will. I love it. It's one of my hobbies. But really, the real things that happened, and to talk about them, and even more importantly, to explain them, even in a way of film. It'd be so cool to have like the 10 plagues, but then to have Moses, you know, talking and being like, yeah, this breaks God's heart too, that this has to happen.
Right.
And be able to even dig into some of the theology behind it in the film and help explain it. And that way people who watch it, who aren't Christians, have a better understanding of what is actually happening.
Sure, this isn't just you're bad, so here's punishment.
Right.
There were religious implications to all of the plagues individually. There's a whole lot more to it than we see on the surface level, even when you just read through the Bible without context, as well as in the movies that we see about these things.
Right. On top of this, some other things I'd like to see in it is, and something that I think that we as Christian filmmakers have missed out on, is the biopic of incredible Christians in the world. Like making a movie about Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
That'd be interesting.
That would be a phenomenal film. And I think there already is a movie
do
about
exist.
It, but...
Like those have been made.
Right.
But we're saying that the greater access to more like higher budgets.
Yes. Better
names,
advertising.
Yeah, all those things.
Yeah.
Would
better actors, things
right.
like that. And there's another thing I want to say is, hey, be willing to cast non-Christian people.
Sure.
Be willing to employ non-Christian people, because this is a chance to get the gospel out.
Right.
When you're telling them, hey, this is what your character is doing. Hey, this is what's going on. That doesn't make sense. Well, it's what they did because of their love for Christ, or that's what they did because of their faith. And to be able to spread the gospel more that way too.
I mean, you let Christian Bale play a Jewish man in Exodus. So that's a little hypocritical if you don't let a Jewish person play a Christian person. Okay.
He is Christian Bale, so it's okay.
Right. That's what I'm saying but Moses wasn't. Moses was Jewish.
Dang.
We all know your name. It's nominative determinism. Part of it that there's something else I want to bring up as a good example of the kind of like narrative focus that we're looking at, that we're talking about, is there's a series called The Chosen. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Yeah.
But there's a television drama called The Chosen. It is entirely like crowdfunded at this point. It's really interesting how they're doing it. But in the words of the creators of the series portrays it's about the life of Jesus, but it portrays that life through the eyes of people who met him. So it kind of portrays Jesus in more of a mysterious way. Like,
right.
But what I loved about the couple of episodes that I have watched is that it's not Jesus' show. It's, hey, here's the context in which Jesus arrived on the scene and like what he was preaching to. And also all the side characters, like like his disciples and stuff and other characters are people.
Yeah.
Like Matthew, the tax collector, was like kind of like not ADD, but like bit of a one of the earliest scenes that I remember in the first episode is that he was a tax collector, but it doesn't explain that, but it does show him trying to hide as he went to work. And it doesn't hit you over the head with why this is a thing. And in reality, tax collectors were not liked in the Jewish community because they were essentially working for the enemy.
They were essentially traitors. Yeah.
Yes, they were collecting taxes for their ruler, their usurpers,
and they would often raise tax so they could keep
and steal from people. Yeah. But it also gave him personality traits that are nowhere in the Bible said out loud, which is okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to fill in the gaps, and it's okay to do that. I do not consider it heretical to say that, I don't know, Paul was a little nervous sometimes. I don't know. Like, no, that's not true. He was super bold and would do whatever he wanted. But or just like non-consequential things.
Or
like,
even just say at the beginning, like, hey, we've made a film and it's based on fact.
Sure, maybe give a little
disclaimer.
disclaimer.
Again, I'm going to keep referring because I just watched it. Prince of Egypt does exactly that.
Yeah.
It says, we believe this story is true in its essence.
Yeah. At the beginning of the movie Vice, that came out a couple of years ago, they say, we're making a movie about one of the most notoriously secretive people of all time, so we're doing our best. I really love that. Like, hey, we're trying here, but also we got to add some stuff in, and you got to, to create a satisfying narrative, because as soon as, like, if you just try to portray, there's two ways you can go about it. If you just try to make it a Jesus movie and all his disciples are there, but are just like robotically carrying out the things that happen in the Bible, it just feels like, here's Bible story, which is okay to a certain extent. But if you're trying to create a popular movie that people want to watch, you got to be able to connect to everybody in there. And if it's just Jesus is Jesus and his disciples are there, like, that's going to be a problem for that. What you need to do is create characters that every character in the Bible is relatable to everybody, because they're all in some way in need of grace.
Yeah.
And that's who we are.
Yeah.
And so it should be the easiest thing in the world. Like, every story is about that. Unfortunately, it's just sometimes the message overcomes the content. And I think I think The Chosen is a good, like, example of creating a story that you're actually genuinely interested in. As a Christian, if I go and watch a perfectly biblically accurate movie, I'm just waiting for the next story beat that I already know.
Yeah.
And so if I care about the characters more, and then, yeah, the things that happen are supposed to happen, sure, that's good. But I'm still going to be genuinely interested in what's happening because I like these characters. They're not just robots carrying out this story that I already know.
Well, and the Bible was written as a piece of history, not as a narrative.
Sure, yes.
And so it has left out a lot of...
Right, they are written
beats.
to people to inform them of events that happened, not a fun narrative to read to your kids at night,
right.
That kind of thing.
Right.
So, yeah, you're going to necessarily have to fill in some of the gaps.
I'd also like to see Sony coming with a lot more of their...
Can we get Spider-Man in there?
Yeah, a lot more of their personal IP coming in and adding that
Now,
into...
can we get Jesus in Emoji Movie 2?
I literally blanked.
You literally blanked. I do have another thing that I want to talk about.
Go ahead.
Is not really, like, this is just comment on the Christian audience in general, is be more forgiving.
Yes.
Just in general, but also to movies. To movies that don't necessarily depict everything as you would want them to be depicted. Because A, you don't know.
Yeah.
Whether certain things were in it there or not. Going back to Noah, there's a scene that is pretty controversial where Noah intends to kill a baby after it is born because, and this is my interpretation, he thinks, I don't know if it's my interpretation or if he said it out loud or whatever, but he thinks this is God ending humanity. So a new human is not what's going to happen. Like, right. It's his job. He is the one in charge of killing humanity, essentially, like, and just making sure that animals survive, the ones that God actually wants. And it was pretty controversial to see that. I understand why. It's about Noah wanting to kill a baby, sure. Right. But at the end of the day, we got to look past what's actively happening or what might not be necessarily in the text of the Bible, and be more forgiving as long as those themes are accurate. We as a Christian community can often be up in arms when something is not 100% accurate, even if it narratively makes more sense. Sometimes right. I think at the end of the day, it is trying to make things that are not sacred because they depict events in a book that we consider to be sacred.
Yes.
And I can get into the...
Right.
There's a whole lot there, but a movie about a biblical story is not sacred and has no impact on the Bible at all. So, if it's not 100% accurate, that's okay.
Yes. Be forgiving, yeah.
Yes, be forgiving with those kinds of things.
I also remembered, and I kind of touched on it before, but their production. Like, because, yes, I understand that we would like a Christian writer and a Christian director, somebody who's going to be honoring to our faith, but having that post-production and having very experienced people coming and being able to make these things really changes a film. You know, I talked a while before about... the comparison of Willow to the Star Wars prequels. The Star Wars prequels had great actors in it, but because of poor writing and production, the movies aren't great.
Yeah, those actors were not able to make it better.
But Willow, on the other hand, the acting was pretty poor, but the movie was just so delightful in its writing and its production that it was a great film that I loved.
It, yeah.
Yes. And I think that, you know what, if you want to try and get all Christian actors and all Christian directors and things like that, the movie is probably not going to be as good as it could be, which is fine, but in production can really, really help change that. And getting some really professional production in there could help change that a lot.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One last
Yes.
thing. I also do think it's important that Sony continues this. I mean, they're probably going to, well, it's hard to tell because it's like a subsidiary of theirs. It's not necessarily going to say Sony Pictures on these movies.
Right.
But continue the trend, the new norm of casting ethnically accurate actors.
Yes, please.
There are plenty of actors in the world. Just because you couldn't name them right now doesn't mean they don't exist. But there are plenty of actors in the world. Just do it.
Yeah.
Like it's ironic what we get mad about in movies like Noah or Exodus. We get mad about biblical inaccuracy, but not necessarily that Christian Bale is playing Moses. Like that's not okay.
Yeah. If it's equally important, if not more important, that these people properly represent their race and culture,
right. And
then their faith.
If biblical accuracy is important to you, then this is biblical accuracy. Jesus
accuracy.
was not a white man.
Yes.
Jesus was not Jim Caviezel.
No, he was not. No. I was about to say, all right, any final thoughts on what you would like to see? I will say I'd love to see miniseries on characters of the Bible. It'd be really cool to like dig into the life of Paul in 5 seasons, or whatever.
So much content to Paul.
Yes, so
turn his letters to other people into parts of actual narrative, and there's a lot there. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other like events that I want to see. Like the story of Gideon would be cool.
Yeah,
guys, the Bible is a violent book.
Old Testament,
you like,
yes,
Old Testament. There's some violence in the New Testament, but
Yeah.
mostly in the Old Testament. If you want cool big war epics, the Bible is a good place to go for those.
Absolutely.
There's lots of content there.
Man. All right. Well, guys, let us know what you'd like to see from a Sony-owned Pure Flix. Let us know what type of content you would like to see out of a Christian streaming service. I want to say a big thank you to listening. Thank you to Granger.
Big thank you to listening?
Thank you for listening.
Okay.
And thank you to Granger.
Thank you to the concept of listening.
Thank you to ears. Thank you for Granger. Thank you, Lord, for Granger.
All right, now at
What
the
have you
end,
done
just
to
like
me?
in every episode
What
of this
have you
podcast, we'll
done?
end with our prayer.
Thanks to Granger for the use of our theme song, All My Friends Have Wi-Fi and Some of My Neighbors Do Too, off of the album Dear Sam. Go check out their stuff. It's really good.
And go check out our YouTube channel.
And Lord, thank you for our YouTube channel.
Dear Lord, thank you for this venison. Bear Lord, thank you for this bear. Go check out our YouTube channel if you haven't, if you're not watching or listening to this there. We got lots of stuff coming up, including new PS5 games that just dropped.
Yeah.
We got a lot of stuff. I got my Stardew Valley playthrough.
My Hades playthrough is up right now, going up every day.
Spider-Man Miles Morales is going to be going up soon. We got a lot of stuff, plus hundreds and hundreds of.
As soon as Hades is done, my Bug Snacks is going up.
Yep, we got thousands of videos up there. There's a game that you'll like up there.
Absolutely, yes. Well, guys, thanks again for listening, and always remember that save games, save lives.
Bye.
Voices all night.